Our next question comes from our friend Stephen M. He says, Coach, I was just curious. I am in a wheelchair, and I wanted to know what your thoughts are on the best martial arts style would be to start out with for self-defense for someone in my situation. I am mainly concerned with getting knocked out of my chair, so I'm looking for either things that could help me stay in the chair or things that will help me in the event that I get taken out of my chair and end up on the ground. I have very limited use of my legs. Is there anything out there that you would suggest? Thank you for your videos. I'm a huge fan. Hey, thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. Man. And I noticed there were a few comments to Stephen's question saying, man, you'll never learn any martial arts without the use of your legs, so basically just give up. And I didn't like to hear that, man. And I realize it's a huge disadvantage not being able to use your legs, because legs are really, really super useful in martial arts, especially hand-to-hand combat. But, my friend, I'm going to give you some advice that my older brother gave me years ago when I had fallen on hard times, and he could have solved my problem by throwing some money at it, but he didn't. He gave me something much more valuable. This piece of advice, which I will give you: focus on what you can do instead of what you cannot. And that will make all the difference. I love watching fighters and martial artists that have disabilities and watch how they were able to cope with them. For example, there's a great fighter named Nick Newell who was born with one arm. One of his arms was missing, his right arm missing at the elbow. He had a congenital birth defect. He's got like these tiny little vestigial fingers coming out of his elbow stump, his arm stump. And the guy ended up wrestling in high school, had a very hard time at first, but eventually learned how to wrestle and became a state wrestling champion. And he went on to have a record of something like 14 wins and 1 loss in professional mixed martial arts, with a couple of championship titles along the way. And I watched this guy fight, trying to figure out, how does a guy with one arm win fights in professional mixed martial arts at that level? Because he's not fighting clowns, he's not fighting bozos, he's fighting proficient professional athletes who are well-rounded martial artists. How do you do that? As I was watching him, I picked up on all kinds of really interesting things, like a really cool setup from a single leg to taking the back to a takedown that very few people do. I'd never seen it before. But why not? Because most people don't experience the limitation of fighting with just one arm. And so when you have 2 arms and you understand that, man, that's a blessing. And I watched another thing. Since he's missing the right arm, a lot of people tend to throw a punch on that side of the missing arm. So what does he do? Counters, boom, with a high knee. And he scored a lot of knockouts that way. And that got me thinking about feinting and drawing. But what happens if you deliberately drop that hand to make it look like, oh, there's an opening there, and you can counter with that knee or a kick? I learned quite a bit about feinting and drawing watching this man with one arm. Now, another video I saw which was really interesting was a jiu-jitsu coach working with a guy who was in a similar situation to yours, who had no use of his legs, paralyzed below the waist. And his student managed to earn a blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu without the use of his legs. And legs are really super useful in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. They are. But watching this guy, what he was able to do with his upper body to intelligently defend himself was actually really impressive. So I would say grappling, especially if you're worried about what happens if you get knocked out of the chair, what happens if you're on the ground, especially if you're unable to stand up, grappling is going to help quite a bit. Now, as far as practical self-defense, something I say to everybody: if you're really worried about bad guys in real life coming out and hurting you, get a weapon, learn how to use it, and be prepared to live with the consequences of using it. But other than that, I really think grappling, especially Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is going to help you out a lot. Hey, thanks for the question, and good luck in your martial arts pursuits, my friend.